Hey everybody, it's 521, week number 4. So this week is another lighter week, so we'll look ahead a little bit. Our focus this week, as we look at focus on equity, is around socioeconomic status and socioeconomic disadvantaged students and families. Your first discussion board connects with this using, it says using the website. Click here. That takes you to the California School Dashboard, where you can enter the school you work at, the school maybe you grew up with, or the school that you live close to. And it gives you a dashboard. Um, and this is much like most things this week. Several things can be true at once with this. So there is valuable data here. It's useful looking at this data over time to see what school-wide strategies, initiatives, whatever, how that has impacted things that are being measured. Um, that is useful. And I think a lot of what educators talk about when they talk about what matters in school and why they're in education are things that rarely show up in these dashboards. They want their students to be known, cared for. They work hard on that relationship and then leverage that relationship to make sure students actually learn things. And so a lot of those things don't show up on these dashboards. And so I think it's so easy when you look at just data, just to be like, data, this is a bad school. Like, well, the school is struggling in these markers, and we measured these things. And there's a lot baked into that. Um, and so keep that in mind as you look at it. Try and look at it through kind of a more compassionate stance, which is actually our second discussion board. That's all I'm going to say about that one because that one's pretty self-explanatory. Um, but also looking at it from a stand of curiosity. So why is the school this way? What resources do they or don't they have? What are families struggling with that don't directly reflect on this? What kind of support do teachers have? Does the school have? Where is their funding tied up? What do they have to spend money on? What can they spend money on? Like, what kind of discretionary stuff do we have that makes students more excited about school and promotes kind of that love of learning? So there's a lot baked into it. So just the data by itself is useful, but it tells a story, and looking at what isn't in that story is often something that's omitted from conversations like this. I go back again and again thinking about, particularly when I taught kindergarten, because I think the younger your students tend to be, the more you really get to know families in a way that even from teaching second grade to kindergarten really surprised me how well I knew the families and how much it really had to be a partnership with those kindergarten parents. And a couple things really struck me that when did I teach kindergarten? 12 years ago, maybe now? No, 15. It's been a while, longer than I have had kids. Um, the two things that really stuck out with me, um, and whenever I was teaching lower grades, I just really tried to emphasize getting your kids to read, being around books. If they're not reading independently, even just flipping through books is a great thing. Reading with your kids, reading in front of your kids, like this is what matters far more than homework packets. I remember talking with a family where they were like, well, can we borrow some books? I was like, well, how many books do you have at home? Knowing a bit of research about kind of what's average, looking at kind of high school graduation rates and how that's connected with early childhood literacy. And they're like, I don't know what you mean. Like we don't have books at home. And I had already had like 200 books set aside for my soon to be kids. And at this point, um, we have I think I just counted like one rack, and there's one of the IKEA shelves of like nine and then nine, and they're full of books, and it's about 1,000 books at home that my kids have, just because I know like how important that is. And we have been blessed enough to be able to provide that for our kids. And they were like, well, we don't have books, which is like, wow. Particularly there's some data around. I know this is not like early childhood literacy um, coursework, but I think it pertains so much to the topic around socioeconomic status and how that impacts how students and families show up. Um, when students like the number of books in this one study was connected pretty directly with success later in life. And again, success is measured typically by like high school graduation rate or entrance into college. And there are many ways you can succeed without those. All right. So like grain of salt on all of that. I was just thinking this morning driving into school today, um, just like we got a quote for a water heater, like a tankless water heater, and then looking at upgrading HVAC because now you're moving to heat pumps for all the things. And each one of those is like 15 to $25,000. And so was talking to some other educator friends, like, yep, if I could get my kids to be HVAC people, like that's the job. And that's not the narrative we're saying in school. We're like, college ready. Well, what does that mean? And then what do you do with that degree? Like that's no longer guaranteeing a job. And I know we're going on a bit of a tangent, but I'll bring you back in a moment. And so like more than once I've had educator friends be like, I wish my kid could do plumbing or HVAC or like, something. Because those are the jobs and those are the places um, where there's just really good jobs that don't need advanced degrees. And I don't know that in education we value those trades. I know we don't, because like so many school districts are like, our mission statement is to make college ready kids, college prepared kids, and like there's just this pipeline of what success looks like, which again connects with our California school dashboard. Um, and I remember so clearly with this family looking at like quantity of books read at home and how that relates to high school graduation rates, and they had zero books at home, didn't have a library card, um, and so it was like, let's get you as many books as we can. Like that is your goal this year in kindergarten. Whatever homework packets our grade level is sending out, which I'm also sending out, um, those are not important. Just reading is important. But just it was, they were just really struggling to have 3 meals a day as a family, and so they're not going to buy extra books. And I think so much when you look at something like the CA school dashboard, CA for California. um, I think it's so easy just to be like, well, these test scores are low because of here's some opinions. And so little of it is the narrative around, these families are kind of living day to day financially. So of course they're not buying a library at home. Of course not. The other thing, this was a kindergartner that I had again in second grade. They were one of 15 people living in a one-bedroom apartment. And it was not even a great apartment. It was a small apartment. Um, and not surprisingly, like homework wasn't completed. And our school's policy was, you spend your recess doing that. And so then it was like this poor kid had very little access to recess because there's very little support at home because there's zero private time, zero kind of homework time, and so much of what I've seen people share around kind of back to school as, tips for homework, find a quiet place, a private place, like kind of have your desk that you can go to. And those are fantastic tips. And those very much come from a place of privilege and assume a lot. And so I wonder what our schools would look like if we assumed that kids were 15 people per bedroom, right? Which is for sure not the norm. And um, isn't something that often comes up in these discussions. And so I think the more we can really try and lead from that place of empathy when we're looking at this data around dashboards, when we're looking at how we might support students, when we even look at like quantity of homework assigned, knowing that so many kids not only are going to have a wide array of support from families, siblings, and parents at home, that may or may not know this, but also the ability to even just have a homework place is really like really challenging for so many families. Um, and there's workarounds and there's ways to address that. But I think so much it's like, well, this is our policy. Like you have to have this much homework. And if I as a school or we, give you this homework, that means we are a good school. And it's rarely like, let's stop and look. Where are students? What support do they need? What are they struggling with? What does their day look like? And I think the more we can do that, the better off our students will be. And I think the less frustrated we will get as teachers at the very least. And at best, we really are able to partner with families to give our students and families the support they need. So that's discussion board number one. Um, the other big part, you do not have this due this week, but due the following week, our third assignment, the instructional 3-day lesson plan. Now, this template looks um, very simple. Let me click on this preview, open preview. This is like a 2-page lesson plan template with a few columns. This is going to be several pages. The goal of this lesson plan, and I've said this once and I'll continue to share it, um, you should be able to take a fairly new substitute teacher, hand these their lesson plans, and they will have like a solid lesson because of your plan. So it's not just kind of notes on the back of a napkin of like, all right, I'm an expert teacher and I know my students, I'm going to do this, this, and that. Cool, got it. Which is how I think a lot of us have been in the classroom teach, right? Just like you have it kind of up here and kind of big picture where you're headed, the kind of beginning, middle, and end of a lesson activities, how you're starting it off, how it's going to be sticky for your kids, that's about it. And this needs to be really explicitly listing out all of the things. There's some reflection also looking at how you're connecting Universal Design for Learning, UDL, also looking at Bloom's digital taxonomy, picking that up from I think the week 2 assignments. Um, and so you're going to share that. That one's a fairly simple reflection. Historically, 521 students do a great job with that reflection and tend to have pretty minimal details in the lesson plan. So don't let just because it's like a little table this big um, give you the feeling that like, oh, I can just write a paragraph and that's it for day one. It should be pretty detailed. And as I read it, I should be able to picture what you're doing and what students are learning. Um, yeah, so that's your lesson plan. Um, that's our topic for the week. If you have questions, please reach out. And then just final reminder for those discussion boards, remember you're going to do 2 initial replies, DB1 and 2, and then 4 total responses by Sunday, 2 for the first, 2 for the second. Also make sure that you're having a citation in there, AP format citation for it. And that's what we've got for week 4, everybody.